Warning. The Maverick Marketer is not for the soft, timid, or faint-hearted. If you need permission or seek approval from your mother, spouse, mates in the pub, or anyone else for that matter, this really isn't for you. If any of what you've heard puts you off in the slightest, I advise you not to listen any further. You've been warned. Prepare yourself for the no bullshit, zero fluff. Quick, dirty, and uncensored secrets for any serious coach, trainer, consultant, or speaker who wants to earn more money with less work and fewer headaches. Without having to kiss ass or bend over backwards to please anyone. He's a relentless and fearless renegade who will stop at nothing to reveal the harsh, unforgiving, and brutal truth about what it really takes to succeed in this business. He's a guy people love to hate and hate to love. It's your host, Drew Edwards. The Maverick Marketer is Unleashed.
Well, hello and welcome to another episode of the Maverick Marketer Unleashed podcast. This is Drew Edwards from EliteClientTraction.com and MaverickMarketerUnleashed.com, and I'm joined by my co-host Terry. Terry, how are you?
I'm fantastic, thank you, Drew.
Great stuff. Good to have you on the call. And we have with us today Kim Ades from FrameOfMindCoaching.com. Kim, how are you?
I'm fantastic and super excited to be talking to you guys today.
Awesome. Great stuff. Good to have you on the show. Just to save me doing your intro and for anyone that doesn't know you or who you are, can you tell us who you are and what you do?
Well, I am the president and founder of Frame of Mind Coaching. It's a pretty well-established coaching company. I've been doing this for about 11 years out of Toronto, Canada, and I have a team of coaches, and we coach the highly driven population. And what we do is we look at their thinking and how their thinking impacts their outcomes, and the process we use creates quite dramatic, transformational, and sustainable change for people.
Awesome.
Very, very, very impressive. Just very quickly, you said you coach highly driven population. What percentage of business owners do you think are what you call highly driven, Kim?
Well, it's interesting, right? So I coach business owners who typically exceed revenues over $1 million. So in and of itself, we're seeing that those people are typically highly driven.
Excellent. Excellent.
I want to sort of dig a bit deeper into that in a minute, but before we sort of get into the sort of the core content of the interview, can you tell us one thing about you that most people don't know, so an interesting or funny story or something like that?
Oh my goodness, I have so many funny stories. So I am married, divorced, remarried, and I am a mother of 5. 3 are my stepkids, and we live together in one big home. And so a lot of people don't know that, I say that I have 5 kids. 3 of those are my stepkids, but because they're permanently with me, they are mine. They are mine. And so, we live a pretty active and busy life, and people don't know the fact that I am a stepmom.
Wow. So how old are the children, Kim?
So the youngest, which is mine, she's going to be 17 in August, and the oldest is 22.
Interesting household.
Very interesting household.
But no doubt great fun.
Awesome. So, Kim, tell us a bit more about your background and how you actually came to do what you do now.
So, in a prior life, I used to own a different company. It was called Upward Motion, and we used to build simulation-based assessments. And the purpose of those assessments was to help companies make better hiring decisions. And really what we were after is who's going to be a top performer in any given field, in any given industry. And so we tested for a whole bunch of things. We were looking at intelligence scores. We were looking at personality tests. We were looking at skill sets. And what we discovered is that across the board, it didn't matter which industry, it didn't matter which position, there was one key indicator of top performance that was consistent and really gave a much better predictor of performance than any other indicator, and that was if a person had a higher degree of emotional resilience, they would be much more likely to succeed regardless of the position or the field or the industry. And so when we looked at emotional resilience a little bit more closely, what we discovered was that emotional resilience is really the ability to bounce back from adversity with greater speed and agility. And what that really means is when something bad happens, when we encounter an adversity of sorts, what do we do with it? Do we let it run us down? And if so, for how long? And then how do we bounce back from that experience? And how do we even leverage that experience? How do we do something good with it? How do we use it as an advantage? And those people who had the ability to bounce back quickly and leverage their adversity were going to be much more likely to succeed no matter what they did compared to others. And then when we look at the coaching field, it's not really focused on helping people build their emotional resilience, is it? It's really focused on helping people reach their goals by taking a series of actions. Well, I decided that we were missing the boat and that if we could help people build their emotional resilience and really interpret their adversities in a different way, we were going to help them succeed no matter what they attempted to do. And really, that's how Frame of Mind coaching was born.
Wow, fascinating. And that emotional resilience, to use your terminology, is that about the conversation the individual's having with themselves when they're facing that challenge, whatever that challenge is, that internal conversation?
Well, it's definitely about the internal conversation, but sometimes internal conversations can be quite conscious, if you will, right? Like you can hear yourself talking in your head, you can hear the words you're using, but this is even the conversation that's taking place at a much more subconscious or even unconscious level. So it's a combination of both. And what we're really talking about is what beliefs do you have about the event, the situation, about yourself that causes you to now take new action that holds you in a smaller place compared to where you really want to be. And so that's what we're talking about, is how do we uncover the stuff underneath the surface and bring it to the surface and address it so that we are identifying what we would call limiting beliefs and removing them from the playing field.
Wow.
Fascinating. Absolutely fascinating.
Yeah, it really is. Sorry, Terry, you can ask a question?
Yeah, I'm just I could ask you so many questions about this, Kim. I'm just curious, if you were at a dinner party, no, better still, if you were at a networking event and you were talking to an individual, could you, I guess, take a guess as to that individual's emotional intelligence, just with a 10, 15-minute conversation, get some idea of it?
Well, you do get an idea of where a person is oriented, how they think, and what runs them down, what makes them frustrated, what triggers them. You definitely do get a very good sense of that. I mean, I do a lot of presentations, and in my presentations, I bring volunteers on stage, and I have them do a series of exercises. Each volunteer does one exercise, and they're on stage for all of 2.5 minutes. And in those 2.5 minutes, you get a world, a lifetime of understanding of how their emotional resilience is wired. It's quite amazing, and it doesn't take long if you pay attention to the language a person uses. If you pay attention to the stories they tell, then it's very easy to see how people are oriented.
Yeah, fascinating. I do find it's absolutely fascinating. Sorry, John, you're going to ask something. Yeah, you carry on.
Yeah, I mean, when you say that you can sort of spot this from the emotion, with the stories they tell and the words they use, what is it that you're looking for? If someone's going to have sort of a strong emotional resilience, what is it you're looking for? What sort of language are they using in comparison to somebody who's perhaps not so strong?
I'll give you an example, and if you don't mind right now, I'll talk directly to the audience for a minute, okay? So I'm going to give everybody an exercise to do. What I want you to do is I want you to stand up. I want you to hold a glass of water in your right hand, and I want you to stretch your right hand out, and at the same time, I want you to take your left hand and put it behind your back.
I'm doing it.
Okay, Are you doing it? Are you standing up?
I am, yeah.
Okay, great. So your right hand is stretched out and your left hand is behind your back. And what I want you to do is, without bending your arm, drink the water.
Without bending my arm.
Drink the water.
Okay.
And we have to keep our arm stretched out, or can we put the glass down, or?
The instruction is, without bending your arm, drink the water.
Okay. Can I tell you what I've done?
Tell me.
I've picked it up with the other hand.
Good for you. So here, so I asked you to put your hand behind your back, and you decided that it wasn't a rule, that you didn't have to keep it there. But that's not the norm, right? So when I do this exercise in front of an audience, what happens is a lot of people just say, I can't. If I do that, I will spill water all over me. They try to like raise it up on top of their heads. Some people look at me when somebody in the audience suggests, hey, can he or she use the other hand? The person on stage will look at me and say, hey, can I use the other hand? And they're looking to me for permission. And I always say, who am I that you should ask for permission from me? Right? And so what we do is, with one simple exercise, we see a person's thinking. We see their processing. We see where they get stuck. And this is just in one instance, but I can guarantee that they get stuck over and over again in the same places in other areas of their lives. So we can see how a person thinks just by giving them a little bit of a challenge and seeing how they process that challenge. And very often they will speak out loud, right? So and they will express what they're thinking as they're going through the process. Even sometimes they gasp. They don't have any words, or they laugh, or they, whatever it is that they express will tell me exactly how their thinking is wired.
Of course, yeah. And Kim, are people born like this, or is it innate? Is it nature nurture? What creates this?
Well, I would say that people are born with a certain predisposition to have a higher degree of emotional resilience than others, for sure. People are taught this by seeing how other people in their lives react to situations. So, for example, there's a story my daughter tells over and over again, and it was a story of maybe she was 8 or 9 years old, and she was with me in the kitchen, and she was cutting some strawberries, and she cut herself. And she got really freaked out. And so we stopped what we were doing. We stopped the blood and we put on a Band-Aid. And I looked at her. I said, well, we have more strawberries to cut. Let's continue. And she was shocked that I didn't just, prevent her from carrying on. But the way that I reacted profoundly left an imprint on her. And that's how we are all wired, is not only in our natural DNA, but by the inputs we receive from others. Right? Yeah. And then over and above that, we have experiences, and those experiences can be tough. And the way we bounce back from those experiences leave a mark as well. They leave a memory. Let's call it even a cellular memory that we draw back on when we experience the same thing over and over again. And we become more and more protective. And so all of these things contribute to the way we think about our experiences, the way we interpret events.
Yes, of course, and it's funny. It's interesting you say it. I suppose it highlights me. Drew and I, when we're coaching our clients, we might perhaps talk to them about, I don't know, maybe doing a webinar. And some of our clients will say, I can't do that. Other clients will say, I haven't done that yet. But that straight away tells me something about that individual. The individual that kind of says straight away they can't do it, as opposed to the individual that says, I haven't done that yet. And it's always... I find this fascinating. Just that language is quite revealing, though, isn't it?
Well, it's extremely revealing, and if we just start paying attention to language, then we get a whole host of information about our clients. But my job is not only to pay attention to what my clients are saying, but it's to equip my clients to listen to themselves, to pay attention to the stories they tell, the language they use. Because for me, language or speech follows thought, right? That's what comes after. First we think, then we speak. Even if that happens at a nano minute, right? Even if that happens without even our conscious awareness, that's the order of operations. First we think, then we speak. And so when, I can't tell you how many people come to me and say, look, I'm experiencing a lot of conflict, whether it's in a work environment or personally, like there's a person that I have a lot of conflict with, I think we have a communication problem. And I always say, you don't have a communication problem, you speak very clearly. Like your language skills are clear to me, I understand every word you're saying. What you're really experiencing is a thinking problem, because thought precedes speech. And thought precedes action. And so when people struggle, normally what they do is they start to take different action, right? You've heard the expression, if you always do what you always did, you'll always get what you always got. You ever heard of that one?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, but it's flawed.
Oh, okay.
It's flawed because the truth of the matter is, if you always think what you always thought, you'll always get what you always got. And so
Yeah.
very often in the coaching world, and even in the world of highly driven entrepreneurs or individuals, when they're not getting the results that they want, they say, how can I do this differently? What can I do differently in order to get a different result? And the truth of the matter is, before taking any action, it's really wise to ask yourself, how am I thinking about this in a way that's causing me struggle and frustration? How can I think about this differently? And that will open everything up. And when you start thinking about things differently, your actions will naturally follow.
Awesome.
I've got to say, man, I don't want to be seen here to be sort of blowing, sitting here to blowing smoke, Drew, but I have to say, one of Drew's strength is just that he can. We can have a challenge, and I always find Drew's conversation fascinating because he says, "Well, this is what we've done." And he does tend to ask the question. I'm very aware of it. Well, what can we do differently? Drew's my son. I don't know if you know him. So I'm always very aware of the way that Drew thinks. He constantly asks that question. If we're not getting the results, how can we do this differently? And I do see it's one of his strengths, actually.
Well, it's a strength, but before we start doing different things, a great question would be, what beliefs do we have about this that's causing the result that we're getting right now?
Excellent question.
On that, Kim, how do you change your thinking? I mean, we're saying that a lot of the conversations that we have with ourselves are based on the experience we've had when we're younger. How do we change it?
Well, one of the things we need to do is understand, start to understand our patterns, start to pick them up, start to notice our tendencies. I'll give you an example. One of my clients is a worrier, huge worrier. But if we look at where that comes from, what we see is that she's extremely creative, has built an incredibly creative, interesting business, and has been very successful because of her creativity. But that same creativity also has her inventing stories that cause her to worry. Oh my God, what will this person think if, or how will I be perceived if that, or the worst thing in the world that could happen is X, Y, or Z, and she's inventing these stories. And so what we find often is that people have tendencies, and what I'm really saying is that a lot of times our strength becomes a thorn in our side. What brought us to this point won't necessarily bring us to the point where we want to go next. And so the idea at first, in terms of how do you change your thinking, is to start observing your patterns and your tendencies, and understand the triggers that cause you to get into a negative emotional state. So worry is a negative emotional state, for example, or the tendencies that get you into trouble. For example, I have another client who's very impulsive, and that impulsivity allows him to jump on opportunity. He sees them faster than others, but at the same time, that impulsivity also causes him to make rash decisions that he sometimes feels wishes he hadn't made.
Yeah.
And so what we want to do is just start to notice the pattern. We don't want to throw out the baby with the bathwater, but we want to start just understanding what's happening when. And so the biggest part of changing your thinking is observing and noticing, and then understanding that things don't have to stay the same, and that we can make change. And so following that emotional state, when you get into a state of distress or frustration or whatever it is, understanding that those states are a function of your thinking as opposed to a function of the environment around you. So for example, my worrier is worried because her thinking is causing her to worry. Her imagination is bringing her to that place. And so what I do with her is help her distinguish fact from fiction. Like, what are you inventing and what's actually true?
Yeah.
Yeah. So with that in mind, Kim, with that thinking, I'm curious on a purely personal level for you, what's the biggest mistake you've made in your business, and how did you overcome it?
I'm a person who tries a lot of things, and again, that has brought me to a good place. So even when I started my coaching business, I was an experimenter. I experimented with my coaching model. I experimented with a group of people. I actually called it a pilot. So that was a great thing, except at a certain point you have to stop experimenting and you have to just start to define things. And I think for me, one of the biggest mistakes I made was not identifying a very specific group of people that I coached. It took me a while to really put my finger on it and only focus on that group. And for me, that just really, really slowed me down. Like I tried to serve everyone instead of really defining the group that was my target market and the group that resonated for me, and that was a big mistake.
Mm.
And again, I think that's something that all business owners go through. Just making mistakes about who it is that they're targeting and not talking to or not targeting the right people.
And just spending a whole lot of time spinning your wheels because you're talking to the wrong people.
Yeah. So Kim, what difference did it make in your business when you actually became clear about who it was that you wanted to target?
It was a game changer, to be honest, because I stopped doing a whole bunch of things that were just a waste of my time and a drain on my energy, and quite frankly, a drain on my pocketbook, right? So I just stopped doing all those things and really took on a few very narrowly focused activities that would bring in a much, much more significant and larger result. And so the idea is stop trying to do everything, stop trying to be everything to everybody, and really narrowly focus. And for me, honestly, was a game changer on a personal level, on an energy level, and financially as well.
And how long did it take to make that transformation?
Unfortunately, I would say too long. I would say it took about 5 years. That's too long. Yeah.
And you say sort of one of the big shifts you made was just focus on a small sort of high result yielding activity. On a sort of day-to-day basis, what are the key things that you have to achieve to sort of keep your business going, to keep your business growing?
Well, the way that we get clients is essentially from 4 sources. One is through podcasts, and here I am. Number 2 is through live speaking engagements, and so I've ramped that up over the past, couple of years, and now I'm out on the road once or twice a month, so that's really important. And number 3 is through referrals, and of course by keeping in contact with our past clients. But those, through newsletters and all that kind of thing. So those are the 4 key activities that we do. We've tried to do other things like advertising, and we find that it doesn't resonate for our market. We've tried to attend trade shows, and that was a big fail. Like, we've tried a whole bunch of things and have realized there are a few activities that really drive the type of interest that we're after.
Okay.
And just moving on from that, because as people listen to this, I know they're going to find this absolutely fascinating. Are there any particular books that you would recommend that business owners and executives can read on this subject? Yeah.
Well, there's a book called Scaling Up, which I highly recommend, written by a gentleman named Vern Harnish. But these are for people who really want to grow their businesses and grow their teams, that type of thing. That's a really great book. And then on a more personal level, it's not so much a business book, but it's an interesting book to help you kind of look at the world through a slightly different lens or a different perspective. Is a book written by a gentleman named Benjamin Zander, and he's the conductor for the Boston Philharmonic Orchestra. The book is called The Art of Possibility.
Oh, yes.
Really great book, funny, entertaining, warm, all of that stuff, but really kind of puts things upside down for you, and you kind of go, wow, that's a really different way of looking at life.
Right. So, Scaling Up by Vern Harnish. I've read one of his early books, actually, which I can't remember as I'm sitting here. And The Art of Possibility. And the author's name is?
Benjamin Zander.
Benjamin Zander. Excellent.
You're listening to Maverick Marketer Unleashed podcast. For show notes, additional resources, and podcast updates, head over to www.maverickmarketerunleashed.com.
And Kim, in your business, what's been the biggest breakthrough moment over the past 12 months?
You know what? I've been doing more and more speaking, and so for me, I think the biggest breakthrough is just getting outstanding results in my speaking. Just, 9.5s, 9.6s out of 10. That's good. I'm happy with that.
Awesome.
And I'm curious, what beliefs do you have that get those kind of results? Because that's quite impressive, Kim.
What beliefs do I have? You know what? I don't know if it's a belief issue. I mean, it could be. Of course it could be. But for me, I think I've just done a lot of time. And I think fundamentally, I used to feel a little bit uncomfortable on stage. I always did a good job on stage, but I always felt like I was, a little bit of taking my act on the show, on the road, like a little bit of and I always felt uncomfortable. I always felt judged. I just always felt like this dis-ease being on stage. And I really transformed that into figuring out how to just serve the audience, love the audience, and share myself with the audience. And so that by itself helped me think about the whole experience a lot differently. And so I'm there not necessarily for any other outcome than to deliver incredible value.
Wow, just that thinking, that conversation with yourself is transformed the way that you can now present on stage.
Right. Like, usually when you're a speaker, you're hoping to experience love from the audience. And I understand that my job there is the opposite, is to deliver love rather than to expect to receive it.
Oh, what a great attitude. Excellent. Yeah. Excellent. And you talk to a lot of business owners and executives. What would you say is some of the biggest mistakes you've seen made by other executives and business owners, Kim?
I see a whole bunch of mistakes. One of the mistakes I see, I actually wrote a white paper called The 7 Thinking Traps of that leaders encounter. And what I see is that sometimes leaders feel like nobody could do it as well as they can, and so they end up taking on far too much. Sometimes I feel like they get very complacent, and they feel like, well, I've reached a great place. I don't really need to continue growing or learning. I know what I know. I've done this for a while. I've experienced success. Like, it's tried and true. Don't expand your horizons. And so that's another problem. Another mistake I've seen, and I've seen this one in a big, huge way, is that a lot of leaders get into the trap of feeling very isolated. Like they feel like they're in this alone. They can't share the burden with anybody. And so really at the end of the day, what we see is a series of thinking traps or thinking mistakes that people fall into. And by the way, if anyone is interested in receiving this white paper, I'd be happy to send it to you. Just send me an email, kim@frameofmindcoaching.com. And my advice is to kind of skim through the white paper and look at which trap is really one that resonates for you, and then read that one with greater depth.
But that's interesting what you said there. Those 3 traits there, to be able to do it all, certainly to be able to do it all, and the isolation. Again, this is my opinion. I kind of, my gut reaction is, but I would imagine they're almost like personality traits of business owners per se, and entrepreneurs.
They're not personality traits. They're thinking patterns, which is very different from personality traits. For example, one of the other traps that I see leaders fall into over and over again is image management. So the need to manage other people's impressions of them. And so, and where that comes from is the thought that if I don't look good in the eyes of others, then I'm not as worthy. And so that's a thinking issue. It's not a personality issue. Yeah,
you've explained that really well, Kim. Actually, that's a really good point. Yeah. So would they not be typical ways that entrepreneurs think? Those things about being able to do it all, the feeling of isolation, the image management.
Well, yeah, exactly. I've identified 7 traps that I've seen over and over again. There could be a whole lot more, but these are the ones that are very common, that you could easily pick up. For example, if I'm coaching someone. By the way, we haven't spoken about this, but it's super interesting. And for those of you who are listening, you might want to think about how you can apply this in your life. One of the things that I do when I coach people is I ask them to journal in an online journal every single day. And it's set up so that I read their journal. So I give them a question at the beginning of the week. They get the question, and that gets the ball rolling. And then they start journaling. And every time they journal, the journal gets sent to me, and I read and respond to the journal. And I've created a piece of software in order to make that happen. That software is called Journal Engine. And so there's this private and intimate journaling experience that I'm having with my clients, and they're journaling every single day. So I'm in contact with my clients every day. But this whole process of journaling, right, whether you're working with a coach or not, is very profound and allows clients to really see their patterns, see their words, see their stories, see how they repeat the same things over and over and over again in their lives.
That makes sense, yeah.
Interesting stuff. So,
Yeah.
Kim, again, just going back to you, you mentioned earlier that you're constantly trying new things, and sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. How do you deal with failure? How do you deal, again, in terms of mindset, how do you deal with things not quite working out to plan?
It doesn't really run me down a whole lot. I chalk it up to experience. I chalk it up. As long as I'm learning, then it's a good thing. So, I mentioned before I tried online ads and didn't get anywhere. And I even tried it more than once with different people, with different consultants. And I thought, well, that guy didn't know what he was doing. Let me try someone new. And so, I'm very hopeful. I try things, and if they don't work, they don't work. I move on to the next thing, but I don't stop. Like, that's maybe a character trait of mine, is that if something doesn't work, I definitely start to think about what is it that I want to achieve, and how can I think about that in a way that gets me closer to that result. So I'm always trying things. I enjoy it because it gives me the opportunity to learn.
So you have a real wealth of experience in doing it yourself, and also the business owners and executives you coach yourself. I believe have you written a book on this subject, Kim?
I've written a book called What You Focus On Grows, and it's a book of short stories, and it's really a book of observations, experiences, stories of others, where we look at common life encounters or experiences through a completely different lens. And that book is designed to help readers start to flex what I would say is their mind muscle, to start looking at everything a little bit differently. And so this gives them a really good head start and gets them practicing looking at things in a way that fuels them rather than drains them.
And that book, is it available on Amazon?
It's available on our website, actually, frameofmindcoaching.com.
Frameofmindcoaching.com.
Yeah.
Excellent. Just making a frameofmindcoaching.com. Great. Thanks for that. And with the book and with your experience, what for you, Kim, has been the biggest breakthrough moments in your business, say, over the last 12 months?
Yeah, again, I would say that just doing more and more speaking engagements has been incredible for me, getting great results, and understanding that I can spend 5 minutes with someone and make a huge difference in their lives, or spend, years with someone and make a difference in their lives, and just kind of letting go of the need to hit a certain number or anything like that, and just really focus on being of service.
Awesome. Good stuff. Kim, again, so you've worked with a lot of highly successful people. Can you talk to us a bit about, if someone's listening to this now and they're perhaps doing 6 figures a year and they want to make the leap to, or the transition to 7 figures, what do they need to change in their mindset typically? What shifts do they need to make?
Well, it's different for each person. And so the journey really is, what's the thinking that's got me to here, and what's the thinking, what do I believe is getting in the way from me moving forward? And so what we're really looking at is, what do people believe to be true about their abilities, about their situation, about their circumstances, about their client base, about their team? We're looking at their thinking and identifying where their thinking is lined up to help them reach that goal, and where their thinking is often really getting in the way and preventing them from being able to reach that goal. At the end of the day, the single most important change that a person can make is their thinking. And when their thinking is lined up with their goals, then their actions become natural and automatically help them reach that goal. And so, again, it's different for each person. It's not prescriptive. Everybody has to think in X, Y, or Z terms in order to reach, the $1 million mark. That's not what we're talking about. What we're really saying is everybody is brought up and wired differently, and there's some wiring in a person's system that simply interferes with their ability to move forward. And what we want to do is untangle the wiring and help to position them or pivot them towards their goal, and teach them how to do that on their own consistently.
Kim, you've just used the term there, thinking lined up with a goal. Could you give us an example? Because let me explain. We meet business owners all the time who want to get their business to the next level. And I'm not sure if I understand. When you say thinking lined up with their goal, could you give us an example of what you mean by that, please, Kim?
Yes, I'll use a personal example of a client I had, okay? How's that? Just to make it really simple. So I had this client, amazing guy, really super intelligent, owned an accounting firm. And when he came to me, I asked him a question, and the question was, what's the single most important thing in your life? Like, singularly, what's your priority? He said, hands down, the single most important thing in my life is my relationship with my wife. It's super important to me that we are intimate, that we are on the same page, that we are heading in the same direction, that we spend time together, that we raise our kids where we're, in agreement. And so by far, it's more important than my relationship with my kids, my business, anything. It's my relationship with my wife. I want to be together and tight. Well, about 3 weeks later, he journaled in his online journal, and he said, I got into a massive fight with my wife. And I said, well, what happened? He said, well, she and I disagreed on how to discipline one of our children. And he went on to explain what happened, and the details aren't that important. Suffice it to say, he was so upset with her actions, like he was so mad, so upset that he decided to sleep in the other room. So I'm going to ask you, does sleeping in the other room help him achieve his goal of being intimate with his wife?
Yeah.
Excellent example, Kim.
Right? It doesn't. And that's what happens. We get distracted. We get sideswiped. And we end up pointing in the other direction, a direction that's not aligned with our goals. And what really happened is our thinking got in the way.
So in a business, I want to just ask you another question on this. If a business owner says, I want to get it to 7 figures, and I say to them, what did you do today? And they say, well, I spent the first hour on Facebook. Is that an example of that type of thing there, where the thinking is not in line with their goals?
Well, that's how an action may not be in line with their goals. The question is, why do they spend time on Facebook, right? And so what I would want to do is say, so what are your goals? And let's identify the things that will help you reach your goals. And then let's identify where you get distracted and understand the thinking that causes those distractions. So I'll give you another example. One of my clients made a decision for herself that she was going to take 1 day off a week. And on that day off, she would take it doing whatever she wanted to do, except she was haunted with the fact that she didn't respond to emails, right? So, at some point in the middle of her day, she would go back and respond to emails. But that was diametrically opposed to the idea of taking a day off.
Yeah.
Right? And so in business, what we find is there's some other compelling belief that causes us to take actions because we feel that those actions are critical or important or compelling or whatever they are. And so the idea isn't just to stop doing that and, create a disciplinary tactic, but to understand what is the belief that causes you to have to look at email every time. What's the belief? Well, if I don't answer, people won't, be happy with my delay, and that will look bad, and on and on and on. And so we're really looking at what's underneath the action, not just the action alone.
Yeah, that's a fantastic, really powerful stuff there, Kim. And it's on a purely personal level, it makes the whole thing so clear, and you've explained that really well. Excellent. Thank you so much for sharing that, Kim. That's excellent.
My pleasure.
Kim, who's been who's had the biggest impact on your entrepreneurial journey?
I'd have to say probably my father. Probably, he was an entrepreneur. He grew a very sizable business. He was in the manufacturing industry and created a powder coatings company where they manufacture powder. It's still a very, very large and active company. But he and I used to talk about sales, and one of the stories he used to tell was a story of a movie about have you ever heard of the movie The King of Comedy?
Yeah.
And so I don't remember all the details, but essentially there was Robert De Niro, who played the role of a guy named Rupert Pumpkin, and what he wanted to do was have his 15 minutes of fame, and he thought what he would do was knock on the door of a famous TV personality and see if he could get those 15 minutes. And that guy gave him no time at all. And so he would go and he would show up and sit and wait in the waiting room to the point where he was so annoying that they kicked him out. And Rupert Pumpkin, what he did was, if he got kicked out the door, he would climb in through the window. And that was really my dad's philosophy, is if you get kicked out of the door, then find a window and climb in through that. And so really the philosophy is just don't stop. Don't give up. Try something new. Just because you do experience a blockage or a failure in one place, it doesn't have to mean or reflect that you're a failure or that you have to stop your activities. Become more creative. Think of a more ingenious plan. And so I think to a great extent that was a great influence for me.
Yeah, again, that comes back to what you said earlier about the stories you're telling yourself. So if you get that rejection, some people say they get that rejection, they say, oh, nobody's going to buy my product or my service, and this is the end of it. And what you're saying, going back to the film The King of Comedy, which is, I think it's so crazy film, isn't it? Just find another window.
Yeah, try something new and think about it differently. I think that, in the coaching world, a lot of people who have trouble selling their coaching aren't really clear about what they're selling. And I would say to you that that's common in a lot of industries. They're not clear about what they're selling, and they don't know how to really explain the value of their product or service.
Excellent. Sorry, Drew, go.
Yeah, Kim, I was going to ask, can you tell us a bit more about your coaching program? What if anyone listens to this interested, what can they expect?
Yeah, so usually we coach people for a 6-month period, but it's the first 10 weeks that are most foundational and most important. So in the first 10 weeks, what happens is there's a call once a week. Every call is recorded. And the reason we record the calls is so that people can listen to themselves and hear the recordings and start to become an observer of their own thinking. They could hear the language they use, the tone they use, their emotional state, their stories, and they can start to really pay attention to how they show up. In between every call, we're asking them to journal in an online journal every single day. So we're in contact with our clients every single day. It's a very intense, it's very intimate, and the distance that people travel in even that 10 weeks period is very substantial. It's quite shocking, actually. And then after the 10 weeks is over, we put them in an integrative maintenance program where what they're doing is they're integrating what they're learning into their lives and managing it a little bit more on their own. And so the calls slow down. They're once every 2 weeks instead of once a week, but that goes for a 6-month period. And so what we find with our clients is the kind of change they experience is deep, sustainable, and transformational change. It's not something that they only experience while they're in coaching. It's what they experience and take forward with them years and years and years later.
Brilliant. Excellent stuff. That really is.
And Kim, where can our listeners go to find out more about what you do? I mean, you mentioned your website. Is there any other ways we can contact you?
Yeah, one of the best things to do is actually on the website, frameofmindcoaching.com, is the opportunity to take an assessment. It's called Assess Your Frame of Mind. And really one of the most important things, if anybody is thinking about their lives and thinking about ways that they want to change, the most important starting point is to identify where you are right now. Because if you're pointed in the wrong direction and you keep moving forward, you just get further away from where you want to be. And so that assessment gives you an opportunity to really take stock of where you are now. And in the assessment, there are 2 types of questions. There are, how do you feel about X, Y, or Z on a scale of 1 to 10? But then there are journaling questions. And that gets you starting to write your story. And that assessment goes to one of our coaches who actually reviews it with you person to person. That conversation alone can create substantial change for anyone who does that exercise.
And that's on your website, frameofmind.com.
No, frameofmindcoaching.com.
Oh, sorry, frameofmindcoaching.com.
Yeah.
Right.
Awesome.
Excellent.
Kim, great stuff. It's been Terry. Your questions?
No, Kim, I've got to say, really enjoyed that. You've shared some real gems there.
Yeah.
I want to say thank you very much indeed, Kim. Kim, I found that absolutely fascinating.
Thank you so much for having me on your podcast. It was a great opportunity, and I appreciate it.
Awesome, brilliant. Not a problem, Kim. Again, thanks for coming on. I will speak with you again soon. Until then, take care, take action, and be relentless.